Hey, welcome into the Irish NFL show presented by Trust Gaming. Michael McQuaid, joined by the lads. Just a reminder while we're starting, if you retweet or pin tweet on our Twitter page, you have a chance to win 2 tickets for the big game on Sunday. We're live from opposite Tottenham Hotspur Stadium on Sunday at 9 a.m. More about that later. We've got guys waiting here. We've got Colin Cronin, Brian O'Leary, and a special guest this evening. We have got Seattle's Associated Press sports writer Tim Booth ahead of Thursday Night Football. A late game tonight for us, Tim. A warm welcome into the Irish NFL show. First appearance, and great to have somebody on talking Seahawks. How are you?
Well, thank you for having me on, guys. I appreciate it.
Of course, Tim, anytime. And look, we ask everybody this, especially somebody from America. Have you any Irish connections yourself, Tim?
Not directly. I know my family has a lot of British Isles, UK sort of background, but offhand I don't think I have any direct Irish descendants. But I know I'm kind of a mix of everything from Ireland and the UK. So.
Tim, it's been an interesting start to the season for the Seahawks. I think especially on offense, and I saw a lot of talk on Twitter today about this. Doug Farrar was comparing it to the various different types of boxers, but it has been noticeable about Pete Carroll, who usually likes to keep the ball, the running game. But the Seahawks are taking more deep shots than we've possibly ever seen them. Was that expected, or what are your thoughts on how the offense has opened up the season?
Well, I think it's been, I think probably the surprise of the way the offense has worked so far is that they haven't leaned on the run game quite as much as I think everyone expected, especially when it came to having Chris Carson coming back and how successful he's been. I think his high so far this year is 16 carries in a game. It might even be a couple less than that. But they really haven't leaned on him quite as much, and that has led to more in the passing game. And it's I think early on you saw the deep shots become available because teams hadn't seen how this offense was going to function with Shane Waldron as the offensive coordinator. He's bringing in sort of this marriage of what the Rams did in the past and trying to make it work with what Russell Wilson does really well here. And so I think some of that is why in the first couple of weeks, Indianapolis and Tennessee specifically, you saw some of those deep shots to Tyler Lockett especially become available. Now that they've got a couple of weeks of film, teams have kind of started to understand a little bit of what they're trying to do. Now comes the time where I think it's got to evolve a little bit, and it's got to be a little bit more of a counter to what they're seeing. And that's a big reason why they brought Shane Waldron in, is because this system is supposed to have counters built in. It's supposed to be able to say, okay, we did this for 4 weeks. Teams know what we've done for 4 weeks. Now we're going to spin off and do plan B based off of the same principles of what we do, but maybe not something that teams have been seeing and been preparing for. So this tonight is really fascinating because this is Shane Waldron's old team, and they kind of know all of his tricks. And I think it's a really interesting test to see how that offense can handle someone who knows the system so well and might be able to counter it in ways that other teams haven't been able to yet this year.
Tim, just turning to the defensive side of the ball, last season, the first half of the season, they were very poor, and they seemed to address that in the second part of the season and got it together. There's been inconsistency so far. Are you concerned going into this game in particular how Stafford has started with the Rams?
Yeah, I actually am concerned. I think the biggest issue right now is the pass defense showed a little bit last week against San Francisco, but again, that was with Jimmy Garoppolo only playing one half. And, if you look at that first drive, he just absolutely carved them up going down the field before his calf started acting up on him. To me, the bigger concern is the run defense. They're last in the NFL in rushing yards allowed. Now, they've played some really good backs. They played Derrick Henry. Alexander Madison with Minnesota is no slouch as a running back. But there's concerns there. And it's especially concerning because they're playing a defensive front for the first few weeks of the season where they been going with 5 defensive linemen for the most part. And typically, if you're doing that, it's because you want to try and be stout against the run. And they're still giving up I think it's 4.6 yards per carry so far this year. So to me, that's the bigger concern. I'm definitely afraid of what Matthew Stafford could do tonight, especially with Cooper Kupp and Robert Woods and all the weapons that he has. But for Seattle and for what they want to try and accomplish defensively, the fact that they're giving up that much on the ground, I think is a bigger long-term concern. Matthew Stafford is going to cause problems tonight that they haven't seen from a quarterback yet this year. But in the broad scheme of where this team expects to be as the season progresses, that run defense has to get better, probably starting tonight, because Darrell Henderson is a dang good running back for the Rams.
Tim, I know you spoke a little bit there about the season so far for Seattle and also a bit about last week, but how did you find that last week? Obviously, getting a victory in Levi Stadium. We've seen Alex Collins do a bit of Irish dancing, so I think we were all happy enough, to be honest with you. But a win last week.
You might see Alex Collins doing a lot of Irish dancing tonight. There's a real concern Chris Carson's not going to be able to go. So if that's the case, Rashad Penny's already on injured reserve. Alex Collins could be the guy tonight. So who knows? You could see a bunch of Irish dancing by the time the evening lets out. But it was a massive win. It was a huge win. Like this, it felt like sort of a season-saving kind of win, because if you lose that game, you're 1-3. With the Rams coming in, you have the potential in 5 days of going from 1-2 to 1-4. And as talented as a team this is, I don't know if they can recover. They could have recovered from being 1-4. So you at least stabilized yourself. You gave yourself sort of that window of, okay, if we can't make the turnaround in 5 days and we lose tonight against the Rams, it's not the end of our season. It's not good, but it's certainly not the end of the season. You had to be encouraged coming out of that game with how the defense played in the second half. Yes, they gave up a ton of yards to the 49ers, but it was a little bit kind of like how last year was, where they sort of gave up their chunks of yards between the 20s, and then when they got down inside their own 20, they managed to make enough stops to keep the game in their control, and they got some turnovers. They hadn't gotten turnovers in the first 3 weeks, and they got a couple of turnovers last week against the 49ers. So it wasn't a pretty game. Russell was really efficient, but it wasn't necessarily a highlight game for him. Other than the one touchdown where he spun out of the sack and hit Freddie Swain for the score. But it was just for a confidence and sort of a stabilizing moment for the team and for the fan base. It was a really, really big victory for them.
Tim, I suppose one player coming in this evening who seems to enjoy playing the Rams is Aaron Donald. We've discussed on this show whether, and I know PFF have this debate as well, is he the best player in the entire league, let alone the best player at just his position? What is the plan for the Seahawks to try and slow down Aaron Donald this evening?
Praying, maybe. I don't know. I tend to agree. He is as dominant of a player that I've seen in person in my years of covering the league. He is just absolutely phenomenal in terms of his speed and his power, his understanding. You just watch him play and you can see how smart he is in terms of reading and recognizing everything that's going on. Just a phenomenal athlete on the field. It's kind of stunning to sit there and watch a defensive tackle do the things that he's able to do. Now, Seattle's got, the interior of their offensive line is actually okay. Kyle Fuller made his first career start for Seattle last year against the Rams in the game in Los Angeles. Injury kind of thrust him into having to play in that game, and he did pretty well against Aaron Donald. So, I think they're going to be paying attention. They have to pay attention, but I don't feel like for them, the rest of how the Rams front is as maybe dangerous as it was in previous years, so that maybe they can focus a little bit more on Aaron and make sure that he's not the one that's blowing up every play, because maybe they're not quite as concerned about the edge rushes, maybe not quite as concerned as some of the blitz packages that the Rams are bringing. But yeah, he has to be the focal point every time you go into a game like this, because if he's disrupting things up front, it makes it so much easier for guys like Jalen Ramsey and the rest of their secondary to make plays on the back end and just completely disrupt everything you're trying to do offensively.
Tim, during the offseason, when it was confirmed that the fans were going to be back in the stadiums, the first stadium that always seems to pop out in our heads, and we discussed it on the show, was obviously in Seattle and the 12th man. And surely that hasn't really been discussed too much this week, the factor in terms of how loud that crowd can get. And Stafford so far, one away game, which was in Indianapolis. I mean, it's not too daunting in comparison to what he has ahead of him tonight.
Yeah, it's tonight will be you know what, it was crazy the first home game, because it had been the first time in 20 months that fans had been allowed at a Seattle home game. Of course, they blew a huge lead in that game and watched Derrick Henry run crazy and kind of left with a little bit of a sour taste in their mouth. But I would expect, tonight to be kind of turned up to another notch. And Matthew Stafford has never played well in Seattle. He's played 3 games here. His last time here was the playoff game in 2016, I think it was, when he was still with the Lions. So he's had moments here, but not great games here. And you're right. The what he's going to face tonight is not what he faced in Indianapolis when they went on the road for the first time this season. And there's always something sort of weird, magical, mysterious, I don't know what it is, that primetime games in Seattle just kind of have a certain oddity to them. They're just amped up that much more, and usually something weird happens in the closing minutes that sort of kind of determines the way the game goes. I think back to the Sunday night game last year with New England, where Cam Newton gets tackled on the last play of the game. There's a laundry list of events that have happened through the years of primetime games having sort of this special thing for Seattle, and the crowd feeds off it and everything. So yeah, it'll be super, super loud, super amped up tonight.
I recall a game last season in the division, and Thursday night against the Cards at home. And I think the Cards were driving to win the game at the end, and Seahawks managed to pull it out. And I remember the crowd. Well, there was no crowd at that time, but even the atmosphere generally within the team when they won that game was significant, and it was a Thursday night game.
Yeah, we always joke about how the north end zone. So if you're looking at the game on TV, it's then the end zone to the left. All the weird plays happen down there. All the strange things happen down there. That was where the Fail Mary happened with Golden Tate 10 years ago. And it's where when the Seahawks played the Lions several years ago on a Monday night game, Cam Chancellor punched the ball out of Calvin Johnson's hands and it went out of the back of the end zone as Detroit was going in for a winning touchdown. I mean, just weird, crazy things happen in that end zone. And so, and they're usually primetime games. So it wouldn't surprise me if something like that happened tonight. I've just kind of become numb to it, I guess.
You're definitely enticing us to stay up late tonight, Tim, which is good, because Thursday night football at times can be difficult, but this is such a good matchup. I'm going to take you away from tonight just a second. As a Broncos fan, I'm not going to talk about this Super Bowl win, a few years ago in MetLife Stadium, but as a guy that's worked, not just looking at the Seahawks, but looking at the Sonics and other teams in the area in Seattle, and obviously an exciting time now in the area with the NHL team. What's been your favorite memory outside of that Super Bowl year covering the Seahawks over the last 5 to 10 years?
Oh man, that's a good question. The Super Bowl was special to me because I grew up in the Northwest. I was a kid who spent my Sunday afternoons before they had all these primetime games. I spent my Sunday afternoons watching Seahawks games with my family. So watching them win a Super Bowl in person was a very cool experience. I'll never forget the way the stadium shook. I always remember the Marshawn Lynch game, but that game was so crazy and I was so busy working that tickets against Green Bay in the NFC Championship game in the following year after they won the Super Bowl was one of the crazier sort of 15-minute spans of football that I could ever remember, between how Green Bay had that game won and then everything turned in the final couple minutes of regulation and then it go into overtime. And it just, that's one of those, you just kind of like take a step back and go, wow, I just saw something that is really, really special and really kind of crazy. I don't get caught up in the whole fandom thing anymore, but just I get caught up in those moments of like, hey, this is really cool. This is a really neat experience to be paid to be here and see these things happen and try and write about it or talk about what took place. So yeah, those are a couple that really stick out of like, wow, I feel pretty fortunate to be here and see that kind of stuff.
Tim, maybe a final one before we get your pick, but just interested in, as somebody who has covered the team, Brian Schottenheimer went to the Jags, and there, from an outside, it seemed like, philosophical differences are what was talked about. The Jags, the one thing that might be getting better at the Jags is that, Trevor Lawrence gets better week to week, and we see him, throwing the ball well. Just as somebody who covered the team, what was like Schottenheimer like there, and what sort of influence do you think he can have on the number 1 overall pick down in Jacksonville?
Well, I personally, Brian was one of the best coaches we've had to work with in the media. He was very forthcoming about things. He was very honest about things. He would kind of if you need to pull him off to the side and help you explain things, he was great about doing that. I think he's a really good teacher of the game. So I think that's going to benefit someone like Trevor Lawrence. I think what happened here was there wasn't enough. I don't know if ingenuity is the right word, but there wasn't enough creativity probably to the way that he wanted to run his offense. That once teams started to figure out last year how Seattle was starting to function, those first 7 games last year, they were crazy good. I mean, they're putting up record numbers. Then teams started to figure out ways to counter it. And there wasn't enough built-in counters to Brian's system that meshed with what the personnel was that allowed them to, essentially counter what the other defenses were doing. And that's what led to the problems. That they needed something that had more creativity, something that had more depth to it, more ingenuity. And that's why Shane Waldron is here. Something that can take more advantage of the personnel that's here. But I don't think from a personality standpoint, there was ever an issue. I think it was more, hey, your offense needs to be a little bit more this, a little bit more that. But in terms of him being a teacher, in terms of having the NFL game be laid out and explained to someone who's a rookie quarterback, I think it's actually a pretty good situation for him and for Trevor. I think Brian's really good at those kind of things. And it doesn't surprise me to see that Trevor is getting better week after week. That's going to come with more experience, but he also has a good leader in Brian and Darrell Bevel, frankly, in Jacksonville to help him along those ways. We'll see how far it can go, but I think that's actually, of all the landing places for him, I thought that was actually a pretty good one in terms of the opportunity he had to teach the game.
Tim, you touched on the fact that if they had a loss last week, they would have been 1-3, so it was a big relief to get that win. Going into the game this evening, and you can follow up with your pick if you wish, who do you believe is under more pressure? Do the Seahawks need to win this game, or is it a case of the Rams having to rebound after last week's defeat, because so many people believe the Rams are one of the clear favorites to go to the Super Bowl this year?
Yeah, I think if you're talking in terms of the division race, it's more important to the Rams because Arizona, they seem legit for right now. They're 4-0. So but I think so in terms of the division, I think it's more important for the Rams. In terms of for the team's psyche, for the fan psyche, a little bit of payback for what happened last year in the playoffs. I think this is a really important game for Seattle. And like I said, I think 1-4 would have been disastrous. 2-3 is not great. The schedule does soften for Seattle for a few weeks coming up, and then it gets really, really tough in November. So to me, it's kind of the Rams can drop this and still win the division with some help. They win this, they stay right on the heels of Arizona and a team that hasn't proven that they can really do it yet with a young quarterback and a young head coach. I don't know. I don't know who it's more important for now that I'm talking it out with you. I'm not sure. I think the Rams win. I think that's probably my pick. I think the Rams win. I think it's close. 28-24, something like that. I think the injury concerns for Seattle are significant. I wonder if they're going to be able to get pressure on Stafford. And there's nothing about Seattle's pass defense so far that shows me that if they don't get pressure, they're going to be able to slow down someone like Matthew Stafford. I think Seattle will have some success moving the ball offensively. This isn't the Rams defense of the past, but I don't think they make enough plays. I think the Rams win something like 28-24, 27-24, something like that.
He's only been sacked 3 times so far.
Yeah, they've done an exceptional job protecting him, and Seattle's kind of beat up with their pass rush, and since week 1, they've not shown the ability to get pressure on the quarterback consistently outside of having to blitz. And that was the big thing in week 1 against Indianapolis, was they were able to pressure with their front 4 and get home and get some sacks, and they just haven't been able to do that in the subsequent 3 weeks without having to bring extra guys. And if you're bringing 7 against Matthew Stafford, if they give him just enough time, he's going to find open guys, and guys like Robert Woods and Cooper Kupp can tear you up.
Absolutely. Tim, look, I mean, that division is just crazy, and we want to thank you for coming on. Obviously, a few hours before kickoff. I know the time difference is a bit crazy where you are. I'm presuming, Tim, that you're going to be getting up at 6:30 a.m. to watch the biggest game of the season in London on Sunday. I'm joking. It's very early. It's very early on the West Coast.
I might get up because I'm a Tottenham fan, just so I can see pictures of the stadium as a American football stadium. But yeah, we'll see. The Jets Falcons isn't quite that intriguing. I might consider sleeping in on a Sunday for a change.
Let's see what happens, I guess. Yeah, and of course, if you're following the team, it's a Sunday up as well, and enjoy it. But thank you so much for coming on, Tim. Really appreciate it. If anybody wants to follow Tim, I'd encourage anybody in Ireland, UK, or Europe, NFL fans, @by Tim Booth, Tim, yeah?
Yep,
on
by
Twitter.
Tim Booth, yep.
Thanks so much for your time, Tim, and hopefully we will repay the favour for coming on in London next year or somewhere else with a pint of Guinness. Thank you.
Sounds good. Thanks, guys.
Thanks,
Tim.
Thank you.
Pleasure to have Tim Booth on there, at by Tim Booth on Twitter, and great to hear a bit of Seahawks talk there as well, lads. But now, the important news. That these boys, well, I think you are aware of it.
What have you got for us, Michael? Oh, nightclubs are reopening.
They've been reopened here for months, Brian. This Sunday we have got the Irish NFL show live from Tottenham Hotspur Stadium. When I say Tottenham Hotspur Stadium, boys, we mean across the road from it, but it's like the backdrop, we're on a rooftop and stuff, so it's gonna be pretty cool. Live Sunday 9 a.m. Really excited to do this. And Colin, I guess for us it's the next step for us, but it's a very exciting time for anybody, never mind taking part in the show, but just even watching the show as well.
Yeah, I mean, after I suppose the cancellation of the games last year and everything that we've all been through, it's great to see the games return, and it's going to be very special for us to have the opportunity to broadcast live on Sunday, and to do so, within a stone's throw of the stadium before the game. Will make it kind of even more special. So looking forward to it. It's supposed to be a sunshiny weekend in London, which will make it even better. So plenty to look forward to over the next few days.
Absolutely. And Brian, obviously news this evening where we're actually waiting on our next guest, who is, I have it written down here, Bob Condotta, who covers the Seahawks for the Seattle Times. He's coming on in 5 minutes. But Brian, Calvin Ridley not traveling with the Falcons. Our friend Michael Lavery is going to the training center tomorrow for the Falcons, and I'm sure he's going to ask Arthur Smith, Brian, why he's not there.
Well, there's a lot of speculation as to why he's not there, one including the fact that they don't believe he's been vaccinated, but we haven't seen that confirmed, so we won't run too much into that. But
and apparently the Falcons, Brian, and I've seen that myself, are the first team to come out in August saying they were 100% vaccinated, and apparently the UK aren't requiring elite sports persons to be vaccinated. As somebody that lives in the north, I had no idea. So,
well, they're saying it's personal reasons, so maybe we're just assuming it's the vaccination situation. So maybe there is a reason why he's not travelled. They've left it to the day in which they were departing to get to London to make that decision. So maybe there was something unforeseen that came up. I'd imagine the Jets have schemed all week to play against him, and not just him, but Gage, the other wide receiver, who's also not travelled and won't play on Sunday. So there'll be a lot of reliance, not to get too much into the game itself, because we will discuss that on Sunday. But the fact that let's be fair, I don't think Kyle Pitts has hit the ground running so far. I don't know if it's a case of how they're running the offense, and he's not been overly involved, and they're going to gradually bring him in as the season goes on. So we all expected him to hit the ground running the way in which he was perceived in the draft as a generational tight end who's also deemed to be a wide receiver. We haven't seen a lot of him. Maybe Sunday is the day in which he steps up to the mark. And we touched on it last week's show. Cordell Patterson seems to be the player who's come out of nowhere. He's had a good career. He's been around different teams, the Patriots, the Bears, but he scored 3 touchdowns last weekend, and he looks to be re-energized and having a great season. So, look, there is other great players on show this weekend for the Falcons and for the Jets. Let's be fair, there's both teams have good players. And just in terms of the show, was for our streaming live on Sunday, and I really can't wait for the show, and I actually can't wait for the game itself. The amount of work involved and the commitment from all of us to get this done, and for other people outside of the show who've helped us to get the equipment and all the components that come with putting a live show on this Sunday, including people in the UK. Again, it's early, but I want to thank them in advance. That's because without all the help, this wouldn't be happening on Sunday.
I'm excited for week 2 whenever we've done it after 1 week, but I'm sure there may be a mishap or two on Sunday, but sure, it'll be a bit of crack as well. At 9 until 10:30 approximately a.m. on Sunday. That is ahead of the Atlanta Falcons against the New York Jets, which is at Tottenham Hotspur Stadium on 2:30 on Sunday. That game is on Sky Sports. The second game is on BBC One NI, which I have been led to believe, Colin, you can get everywhere in the South. So everybody should be happy enough with that.
Well, I grew up and we down in Fermoy, we used to get S4C rather than Channel 4. Yeah, you used to hear about Connectly and Pontypridd a lot.
Well,
Colin
yeah.
used to put a pound in the meter he did to keep the TV running.
I was going to say, if anybody's struggling to watch the game, and they're in the South, I was going to say come up to me, but we'll be at the game. So, I mean, that'll be... It's not going to happen. Maybe bang the door and annoy my wife.
Yeah, 1 of 2 weeks. We're promoting obviously this Sunday show, but yeah, just so as you rightly put out there, Michael, we'll be doing this exact same show the following week. It's going to be great.
I can't wait, and hopefully we should have a couple of guests on Sunday. We will have more guests to follow on Sunday when we actually get sorted. I know Colin and Brian will have to fill out their customs forms, enter in the non-EU. Different talk for different podcasts. We're waiting on Bob Condetta coming on here. Boys, is there anything taking your fancy in the NFL this week outside of the talk of the London games, outside of the Rams and the Seahawks tonight?
Yeah, well, I suppose it won't come as a shock to you. Urban Meyer, I mean, this week has literally been a saga beyond saga, from the fact that he didn't travel back on. It's a bit weird because it happened last Thursday night in the game which they played in Cincinnati, and then it happened on Friday. A lot of the focus, both for the show and for the NFL fans, was all about Sunday's games. But once the week's games concluded on Monday night, going to start delving into what happened then. And obviously, we've all seen the video and won't say any more than that. But it just shows a very bad lack of commitment from a head coach that he hasn't travelled back with the team. It's unforeseen. Like of all the podcasts and different reports I've seen this week, I haven't heard of any player or head coach not traveling back to the team, with the exception of situations where there's family difficulties and you have to stay on. He hasn't traveled back. I mean, the guys earn $12 million a year. He wanted to spend time with his grandchildren in Columbus, Ohio. Do the right thing, travel back with the team. I'm sure you can afford a private jet to send you back the next day. Instead of actually going back to work and evaluating as to why they lost. And in fairness to them, they played reasonably well last Thursday against the Bengals and lost to a last-second field goal. They were 14 points up in the first half. Played well the week before that. It's not like they're getting blown out of games. So for all the disturbances and conversations coming out that he's lost the dressing room, and maybe he has and rightly so after what's happened over the past week. And they've got a game on Sunday against the Titans, which is going to be difficult itself. But it just shows again the lack of understanding of head coaching in the NFL against head coaching in college, because you might be at Ohio State and you can do whatever you want, and college players will follow suit. It's not the same in the NFL.
What do you think of that, Colin?
I mean, I think the reaction to it has been very telling. The fact that everybody has said that from high school to college to their professional careers, they never saw a head coach to not travel home with the team. And so, it's just, I think the bar added to it, but I think even if that hadn't happened, it would have probably been a talking point. But I think the fact that obviously when that emerged, it just led to it. But I've seen the point made, in numerous places this week. How does he say to the players during their off week that to keep the head down, to keep working? Like it makes it very, very difficult. And I know there's been talk from Michael Lombardi and Michael Silver that there's an awful lot of players in the dressing room who are supposed to be, already, if not done, then very, very close to it. So it's one to really keep an eye on it. And it's not just this. It's been a catalog of errors throughout the summer, things that just made no sense. And this is the latest and obviously the most high-profile incident. But when your owner makes a statement like that, you're on very thin ice.
Well, yeah, he's made a statement and he's basically said, to read between the lines, you want to get your act together, and you completely lost the trust of both the ownership and the players. The reality is, when money talks, and to fire him, whatever term you want to use, is going to cost him the bones of 12 million because he's only in the job a couple of months. So I find it hard to see how they will, unless he wants to absorb that type of cost. But the reality is, he's going to have to pay that out. And I think it's one of those situations. Get to the bye week, which is the week after the game in London. So this weekend, Titans. Next weekend, the Dolphins. And then the week thereafter, reassess the situation. But I would imagine if they were to get any results in the next 2 weeks, and it's not against the realms possibility because the NFL is such an unusual league at times, it wouldn't surprise me if they were to go out and win this game on Sunday against the Titans. But all will come to, I suppose it will come to a head at some stage. I'd imagine it will be on the bye week.
Absolutely. And we've actually got our guest, delighted to bring him in here now from Seattle, the guy that covers the Seahawks for the Seattle Times. Bob, I'm so sorry if I pronounce your surname wrong. Blame my Irish accent. Bob Condotta. Bob, welcome in. Can you hear us okay?
Yeah. Hey, how you guys doing?
Bob, thank you very much. I know we had slight technical issues there, and it's the joys of the internet, and it's a pleasure to have you on the Irish NFL show. Just firstly, Bob, have you any Irish heritage yourself? Have you ever been over here to Ireland at all? Or?
I have not. I would like to. I've been to Scotland. So when the Seahawks played in London a few years ago, I've been to London a few times. But when the Seahawks played that game over there a couple years ago, we took the train up to Edinburgh and kind of spent a day or two up there and did that. I have not been to Ireland though. I would like to do that. I do have some Irish heritage on my grandmother's, my mom's side of the family. Not a lot, but a tiny little bit.
Well, certainly we'd encourage you to come over and check it out, and you'll have 3 tour guides now, Bob, whenever you do come over. I suppose interested in talking to you. Russell Wilson, 100 wins now in the NFL. We saw, I suppose, in the off season, perhaps, express some unhappiness, but he certainly is playing at the beginning of these opening kind of 4 games. He looks like he's enjoying himself mightily. Himself and Tyler Lockett linking up quite well. Your thoughts on Russell's opening 4 games to this season?
Yeah, it's been solid. We saw a lot of fun flashes of sort of the new wrinkles in the offense with Shane Waldron, the new offensive coordinator, in the game against Indianapolis. Feels like maybe we haven't seen quite as many kind of new things the last few weeks. It's sort of looked quite a bit, I think, like the familiar Seahawks offense with some real subtle tweaks, I think, here and there. But it never made sense to me to do a complete overhaul because Russell's good at what he's good at, and you're always going to want to have him do those things. They need to get better at sustaining drives. They've sort of been this quick hit offense, and they've either scored in bunches quickly or, like we saw last week, have 5 straight 3 and outs. Kind of being that grinded out offense. They haven't done a ton of that, but the last couple of drives against, they had a couple of drives against San Francisco. I mean, 81 and 80 yards that were really good steps in that direction. But in general, the offense isn't the issue with the Seahawks. I mean, Russell and with the receivers they have, they're always going to put up points and be a threat to score from anywhere on the field.
Bob, do you feel the pressure's on in the game tonight? I mean, the significance of another NFC West game, having won last week, and how challenging division is, because people believe it's one of the best divisions in football. And I suppose we've been pleasantly surprised by how well Arizona have started the season at 4-0. Your thoughts? Is the pressure more on them or on the Rams, do you believe?
No, I think it's more on Seattle for sure. I mean, you don't want to lose a home game in the division, and if you lose to the Rams, you go 2 games behind the Rams already. With knowing you've got to go to the Rams later in the year, and then as you mentioned, Arizona sort of a surprising 4-0 there. But I think you got to start taking them seriously after what they did last week to the Rams in LA. So no, it's definitely. I think anytime you're the home team, the pressure is more on you. The pressure's on the home team to kind of win that game and hold serve, and that's why last week was such a huge win for them to not be 1-3 coming into this game and get a road win against the division team. And if they'd have lost last week, they would have been 2 games behind everybody in the division already, and this game would have felt make or break. This game now doesn't feel make or break, but it definitely, if you're 2-3, and again, every other team in, the Rams and Arizona would each be 4-1 at worst anyway, after the end of the weekend, that starts to be a little bit, I know it's early, but it's also, almost 30% of the season they will have played after tonight. So, every game kind of matters in the NFL that way.
I tell you what, Bob, it's a hell of a game for a Thursday night. It's definitely something to entice us, getting up at 1 or 2 o'clock in the morning to watch it. Have you any exclusive scoop on Chris Carson? Do you think he'll play tonight, or do you think he'll be very, very limited if he does?
Well, I think he'll be, I mean, if he plays, I don't think he's going to get 18 carries or anything like that, but I think there's a chance standing as this is sort of a true 50. It was interesting. We just got in the last half hour their transactions for today, and they did not elevate Josh Johnson off the practice squad, which I thought if they for sure knew Carson couldn't play, they might do. He's the running back who's on the practice squad with, the undrafted rookie free agent who was their leading rusher in the preseason. And, if they wanted to make sure they had another running back, because usually they've had all their, all 4 running backs have been active in their games this year. Travis Homer and DJ Dallas each play a lot on special teams. And so I thought if they knew for sure Carson's not going to play, or, the talk that maybe this was a significant thing, they could have put him on injured reserve today, as they did with D. Eskridge, but they didn't do any of that. So I think that does indicate that there's a chance he plays, and kind of comes down to how he feels. But, my understanding is this isn't something they're worried about from a big picture, long-term perspective, but it is something that's been bothering him this week. And so we'll see. But if he does play, I certainly, I think Alex Collins is going to play. I would have shown the last 2 weeks that he deserves playing time and deserves to be out there. But, again, so much of the NFL, and if you're Pete Carroll, you're thinking about the long term. You got to get through 17 regular season games and then get into the playoffs. So, I think he likes the idea of having 2 running backs he can use quite a bit here. So, I don't think either guy, if Carson's healthy, I don't think either guy is going to get 20 or 25 carries. I think they'll try to split it up.
Bob, I suppose we spoke earlier in the show about Aaron Donald and what he seems to enjoy playing the Seahawks. And you look at his record, I think 15 games, 15 sacks. Outside of Donald, with your Seahawks hat on, what about the Rams? It would concern the Seahawks?
Well, I mean, their secondary on paper should be good. I know they've struggled last week against Kyler Murray, but with Jalen Ramsey and Taylor Rapp, a guy that we're very familiar with here because he was a standout player at the University of Washington, and all of that, you would think that that should be a tough matchup for the Seahawks. It was.
Hoping Bob's still here. We're going to give it 30 seconds, and I'm going to say Navina.
Can you bring him out and bring him back in, Michael?
Do you ever watch the IT Crowd? Have you tried turning it off now again? Here we go. Let's see.
Thanks so far.
We lost you for a little second there, Bob, but I think we have you back. Can you hear us okay? Yeah? There we go. Can you hear us okay, Bob?
Yeah, I can hear you.
No worries. I tell you what, Bob, just with connection issues, Brian has got one final question, if you can hear him.
Bob, I was just going to ask about Pete Carroll. He, I suppose, he never seems to slow up. He's, I suppose, in many ways, he's similar to Bill Belichick. How many more years do you believe, genuinely, he's going to continue to do this head coaching role? Because the passion never seems to end with him. Bob is gone.
I'm hoping and praying that Bob's here, but I'm just gonna very quickly see if we can work it out, and I'm just gonna hit a button and hope that it works. But Bob, if you can hear us, we'd just like to thank you for coming on. Like, taking the time to sit and talk to us ahead of a big game tonight. It really is appreciated, and I don't think he's not there.
No. He was outside the
Bob,
stadium, Michael.
He's outside the stadium. And Bob, if you are listening to this, if you're watching this, thank you very much for coming on. And I'm sure we can get Bob again when he's not outside Lumen Field, and we'll chat some more Seahawks. But we've got another guest coming on in a minute. We've got Ollie Conley coming on from The Guardian US. You boys were talking there about Aaron Donald. Is there anything else that we should be aware of before we have this game tonight, boys, that we should maybe chat about, or before we get the next guest on?
I'm intrigued to see how well this Seattle offensive line plays against this dominant, Rams defense, because it hasn't been touched on so far, because Russell Wilson has played reasonably well, but there's frailties there, and there was the whole offseason saga around Russell Wilson feeling he needed to have more say, and obviously they locked up the left tackle in the offseason with a big contract, but I'm not entirely sure I'm convinced that's the line is fit for purpose in the long run. So, yeah, I suppose this tonight's a real test.
Do you agree, Colin? Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I suppose we'll come to the picks later on. I think the Rams still have a bit to iron out on defense, with Staley going to the Chargers. They haven't looked the same, and they could never look the same. I mean, even if they promoted from within, when you lose somebody like Staley, and you can see the kind of mind that he has. We saw him this week, and I think everyone was super impressed, understandably, about the clip of him talking about running the ball and stuff like that. So he's clearly a very brilliant mind. So it takes time to bed a new system in. You imagine that Seahawks will look to exploit that, but divisional games are, it's a little bit like local derby games in the Premier League. It can form and where it is, because there's so much at stake. You lose one of these and it can set you back. Whereas obviously if the Seahawks were to get the win tonight, that's an enormous boost to them. So that's what makes, I think, this one kind of so intriguing, especially in the NFC West, which is so stacked.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
No, I was just
do you want to add something to that, Brian? Yeah.
No, I just you touched on it earlier. Like, for all the Thursday night games, with the exception of week 1 when the Bucs played the Cowboys, we haven't been really too enamored with what's been put in front of us. But there's always an NFC West game on a Thursday night. Last year, the Cards were away against Seattle. It was a great game, and I imagine we'll have a really, really good game ahead of us this evening.
Absolutely. We are delighted to be joined by a guy called Ollie Conley, who works for The Guardian US, former NFL scout and CFL analyst as well. Ollie, a warm welcome into the Irish NFL show ahead of a stacked Thursday night football. It's your debut on here. Welcome in.
Thank you for having me.
Appreciate the time, Ollie. And look, you've been on a number of different podcasts the last few weeks. You've been on Mina Kimes' podcast with Lenny and stuff. You've been a busy man. But before we start off, I know obviously you're from the UK, but have you any Irish connections yourself? That's a decent surname you have there.
Yeah, that Connolly is the Connolly. I think the great granddad. It's not that far back. In fact, it's funny, whenever I walk around, even in Edinburgh, they have a giant Connolly society. I went with my wife's in-laws. My in-laws came over to visit us, and we met them in Edinburgh, and walking around, they had Connolly society posts everywhere. And if you look at my face, as people can see now, and pull up a picture of the guy, we look we couldn't look more alike. So yeah, pretty decent Irish connection, I'd say.
Yeah, I think that's a pretty solid one. All right, definitely. Figured when we saw that the Connolly, there was a good opportunity there. Ali, look, you wrote a really interesting piece a few weeks back about like the way smart defenses are evolving, as you said, to kind of counter the bootleg. For viewers who maybe haven't had the opportunity to read the piece, can you talk a little bit about that? I really enjoyed going through it. I know I'm asking you to surmise a giant piece that which is really intricate and detailed and goes into it, but it is an interesting piece, the way in which defenses are looking to respond.
Yeah, I think there's two components to it, right? So you have the front end and the back end. The front end is probably the most intriguing thing because it's the most immediate change. Usually when you're defending a boot, like the thing is that the teams, every coach you ever speak to, if any of you guys ever even do local coaching, defensive coaches only care about the run fit, which I know sounds strange to people because it's a passing league and it's a passing game now. They are terrified of the run fit. A run fit, and a run popping for 40 yards down the field, that's them losing their job, right? Pass play, you can just blame the cornerback and say, oh, he wasn't in the right spot. If a run fit pops and you schemed it up wrong, it is a disaster and everyone is leaving the building on Monday. So forever, every time you get the outside zone lead stretch or any of those outside plays where the boot comes off it, that back end lineman who shuffles down the line and does his little thing, he does a little jiggle down the line because he is terrified of the cutback bouncing back of Derrick Henry making him miss and going for 60 yards and him getting cut and his defensive coordinator being let go. So they've just always played it that way. Now what teams have decided to do is say, well, we are getting absolutely killed off the bootleg. Aaron Rodgers is mauling people on shot plays. The entire point of the McVay, Shanahan offense, the Gruden offense is to build explosive plays off a boot action principle, right? So why don't we attack that first and worry about the run later? So what they do, as I wrote in the piece and explained, is they call it green lighting, which is just go hit the guy on every play. So if it's a run play and we're out of the fit, all right, let's just treat it like option football. Let's treat it like when Aaron Rodgers is back there, it's Lamar Jackson. And we use all these creative principles. We scrape, we crack and replace all these coachisms to treat the option, which is account for a quarterback who can run as well as the running back. Let's do that with the throw. And so let's just go and attack Aaron Rodgers on every play. And you see how the Cardinals played the Titans in week 1, right? Is just go and hit Ryan Tannehill. If the guy bounces it back, we'll fold the safety around, we'll fold the linebacker around. And if that guy's not in position, he's the one who gets blamed. We're hitting Tannehill on every play. And he gives the ball and gives the ball and gives the ball. And the one time he doesn't give the ball, Chandler Jones runs smack into his chest and it's a sack fumble and we're scoring 7 points, right? So that is it's hard to comprehend that how much of a change that is for these defensive coaches. That is about 40, 50 years of playing this one design one way. And then someone saying, why are we doing it this way? Why don't we just go after the guy who's the most valuable player on the field?
Only passing quarterbacks, but over the past 4 to 5 years, we've seen quarterbacks come into the league who, I suppose, it's kind of the run pass option now. And I suppose when teams are looking at quarterbacks from the draft, it's more so around have they got the legs. And one particular quarterback, Kyler Murray, and the Cards are 4-0, and they're arguably one of the most explosive offenses right now within the league. Are you pleasantly surprised by how well they were doing? Because there was always an argument coming into the season that they just needed a couple of more players, having lost out on the playoffs in week 17 last year.
Yeah, because they've changed absolutely nothing they do. The only one change they made, I was actually writing about this week, they used to have a giant O-line. Cliff Kingsbury comes from that air raid school, and the thing was wide splits between each lineman, and everyone must be 6'5", 6'6", 6'7". We just want to be giant inside. It used to be the 3 guys inside, the small fellas, and we'll put 2 trees outside. Well, the Cardinals said, no, everyone is going to be 6'7". This year, they said, you know what, that's not working. Let's go get Rodney Hudson, who they list at 6'2", but is probably 6 foot. If we're being generous, he's one of those classic fellows who gives himself a couple of inches. So they really shrunk inside, and they are just mauling people in the run game. It's short guy inside, natural leverage, all the classic stuff, better run game. So they're just bullying people up front, which is not something they've normally had. Schematically, they do nothing different. They run the same stuff. Everyone knows what they're going to run. They just got really good players. You've got a double team DeAndre Hopkins. AJ Green seems alive and well. Went to a clinic in Germany or something and suddenly can run again. Rondale Moore is an unbelievable player in space. That guy makes everyone miss. So they just have better players now. The Kyler thing's interesting. He's so much better from within the pocket than people realize, and he's not as good outside the pocket. What happens is you see 2 or 3 red zone flashes, which is enough, and you think, wow, this guy runs around all game and he makes unbelievable plays. He's actually not that good at throwing the ball when he breaks out the pocket. He is killing people inside. And the good quarterbacks in the league, even those that run, you have to destroy the blitz. If they're going to send an extra guy, you have to throw the ball behind them and punish them for sending an extra play. If they send one, that means we're +1 somewhere on the field. And for the first 2 years in the league, he was average to bad against the blitz. And now he is the best quarterback numerically against the blitz this season. So he's just taken his game to a level where the one thing that used to give him an issue, he's now attacking better than anyone in the league. So I just don't know how then you can even try to stop that.
It's kind of reflective of his numbers. If you're looking at his rushing yards each week compared to this time last year, it's not even close. I mean, the line in which, say, the bookmakers are putting each week is around 38, 39 yards. He hasn't hit in 2 of the games. He hasn't hit over that because he hasn't needed because the offensive line is doing so well.
Yeah, and also people are just saying like, okay, this guy's better than us, so let's just drop as many people in coverage as possible and keep eyes on him. So if they're rushing 3, dropping 8, there's just nowhere to run, and also it's just easier to get rid of the ball quickly. So people are trying to force him to throw the ball, and he's just bullying them through the air as well.
Ollie, I'm not going to ask you who you think is most improved or who the big package has been so far this season, 4 weeks in. Who have you been most surprised by in a bad way? Like, who has shocked you 4 weeks in? If you had to pick one, if you can't pick one, that's fine. But who have you been like the least impressed with after 4 weeks?
Oh, least impressed with. Everything the Falcons do is just tire fire. I would be really surprised if they brought that staff back because it's like incompetent levels of stuff. I'm talking about, like, I've used this example a bunch of times this week, so apologies if people have heard it. They don't time up the snap correctly, which for professional players is embarrassing. They run all that jet stuff. Everyone runs jet now. The guy goes flying behind and let's confuse the eyes. They don't time it properly. So that guy is often scooting. Then the snap comes about 2 or 3 beats after it's supposed to. So as the defense, you're like, well, that guy just flew over there, right? So he's not getting the ball, or he's behind the line of scrimmage, so we'll just go and rally to him. The point is to time it up at the snap, so that then it's confusing who has the ball. So they can't even do that right. I mean, that is something that you would be in trouble for in high school, right? These are professional players, and this is not week 1, this is not preseason. We're into week 5 now, and they don't time the snap correctly. Either that is they don't time it correct, or the coach has designed a system to eliminate one player. He's decided to play 10 on 11 with bad players. So one of those things is really bad. So the Falcons, I think, in terms of, I wouldn't say it's surprising, right? That they had, I think most people suspected it would be. I mean, they went through that weird thing where it's like, are you rebuilding? Are you not? We trade Julio, but we keep Matt Ryan. It was a strange one. But they look incompetent, which I was not expecting Arthur Smith to be that bad and that unprepared on that side of the ball.
Well, this is a good moment just to advertise that we're at Tottenham on Sunday for the Falcons against the Jets. I'm gonna 9 a.m. 9 a.m. Feel free to drop in, Ollie, with a Guinness or a can of Guinness. If you can buy alcohol in England before 10 o'clock.
Yeah,
it seems like
I'm
a
not
civilized
sure
society will allow you to do that. So I have no idea, Colin.
I think that like the Arthur Smith thing is really interesting in that, and the broader point about making the transition from coordinator to head coach, because we've obviously seen over the years so many great coordinators, just struggle to make that transition. Well, Ali, one of the things, you wrote this week about Justin Herbert and what a talent he is, and the NFC or the AFC West obviously is Patrick Mahomes. What do you do if you're the Broncos and the Raiders and you're looking at Patrick Mahomes and Justin Herbert for the next 15 years?
Yeah, I guess you try and lobby for some kind of relocation. Are they taking? When are we doing expansion? Can we move to the Canadian division whenever that starts? Like, what's the deal here? Because what do you do? What you try and do, I guess, is what the Broncos didn't do this offseason, is go and try and get Justin Fields and try it on for a couple of years. And if that doesn't work, go and try and get the next guy. And who knows what happens? We live in the player empowerment era now. Maybe Justin Herbert gets sick of LA for some weird reason and decides to want to move somewhere else. I think what I would not do is roll with Teddy Bridgewater for as fine as he's been through the first few weeks and somehow believe Drew Lock would become something and then decide that's over after 12 days. I would try every year to try and find a guy who could compete with those guys on the field.
Ollie, judging by Justin Herbert's letter that was shown on Monday Night Football when he was 9 years of age, being a quarterback and living in California, I don't think he's going to be moving anywhere anytime soon. You touched on Justin Fields there. There's so many Bears fans in Ireland and the UK. We have to talk about the saga, and it has become a saga, but now it seems to have come to an end finally. On Monday, Coach Matt Nagy saying that Dalton is still the quarterback. Then come Wednesday, he's saying, oh, no, it's actually going to be Justin Fields. And we saw so much of his production last weekend that we know he's a starter long term. I mean, all of this could have been resolved so much sooner because it was inevitable he was going to be the quarterback.
Yeah, I think that the most panicking thing, if I was a Bears fan about that press conference, was Matt Nagy saying how freed he felt by giving up play calling duties, and he was allowed to be involved in all three phases of the game. It's like, whoa, dude, can you just you'd stay in one room and maybe don't call plays and don't be coming to the other two rooms that have been semi-okay. And
probably should stay out of every room at this stage.
Yeah, I think just sit this one out maybe till the end of the season and just hope that Justin Fields saves your job somehow. That's kind of how it's looking for him. I've made my Nagy thoughts clear publicly for 7 years now. It almost feels unfair at this point to just keep going after the guy. I just think he is. I've never ever seen a single thing that I would call close to impressive. He runs 5 or 6 gimmick plays a year that seem to always be on Monday Night Football. He saves them for the national game so that then, people go on First Take and they say that he must be okay because he ran some weird play once and some kind of, creative offensively. I think he is the worst sequencing play caller in the league. That's what everything is about modern football, is layering play designs, sequencing plays, setting something up now that will pay off later on in the game. And if not now, next week, and we'll build our own tendency and then we'll break our own tendency. And he just runs every single thing every single week independent from one another. First down is first down. Doesn't matter what we did on first down. Now it's second down. Nothing ever is married together. And to throw a rookie quarterback into that and say, I don't know, you figure it out. Here's 3 plays in the huddle and you figure out which one you want. It's just crackers.
But there was also the conversation that he was asking Fields to play the Andy Dalton offense, but you should be utilizing this quarterback and the skill set that he has coming out of college and putting a playbook around him more so.
Yeah, I find that argument to be vapid. I think that's no one ever has built an Andy Dalton offense, ever. I mean, at TCU, he ran some spread option stuff way back in the day. He was quite an athletic fella in college, but there's not a single human being who's woke up in the morning being let me design the Andy Dalton offense. Matt Nagy runs the same stuff everyone is running. The schematic design overall, it's just a knockoff version of Kyle Shanahan's offense. I would not be floored if he decided to run Andy Reid's offense for a couple of years, found the Shanahan playbook and was like, well, I guess this is pretty good. Let's just run with this one. It's the exact same stuff. It really is. I mean, I could pull up for you now. We could screen share it. He runs the exact same stuff. He just doesn't have the innate Kyle Shanahan-ness who knows exactly how to sequence these plays. That against this front, I'm going to run this thing. And Kyle Shanahan runs 10, 11 plays to figure out how the defense responds, so then he knows how to attack it in the second half. Matt Nagy is pure vibes, man. He just comes out, first down, let's go, here's the play. That's the difference, right? That the actual designs, if you go through them one by one, they look the same to what the good callers are running.
Let's take one more round, Ollie. We'll quick fire it in that sense, and then I'm sure Brian will ask for your pick ahead of tonight's game at the very end. Late night game, boys. It's tough working tomorrow morning. How about them Cowboys, Ollie? How about them Cowboys?
Yeah.
They look good, man. Yeah.
I don't know how you defend that. They can do absolutely everything. They get big and they flatten you in the run game again. They play with 2 tight ends. They now play with Connor McGovern, the guard, as a fullback. And that's terrifying. And they move him around. He dances around the backfield. They motion him everywhere. And then he comes careening around the corner, and you're a linebacker, right? I fitted this up pretty good. I think we've got this sold. And then here comes a 300-pound guy rolling around the corner. It's like, whoa, where did he come from? It's not supposed to look like that, flying at the second level. And then when they get into the drop back passing game, they have 3 number 1 receivers. That's no one else in the league has anything close to that. And Dak is playing as well as anyone in the league. You cannot play man coverage if you play zone. Dak eats you apart in the pass game. That's the perfect formula. The only thing that would stop them having a deep playoff run is health. If those 3 receivers stay healthy, that offensive line keeps getting beat up. If they can keep those guys healthy throughout the season, if Dak stays healthy, they are as loaded as anyone.
from the Cowboys, who are playing unbelievably, to the Steelers. How do they get through the rest of the season, Ollie? What do you do? I mean, we saw Adam Schefter say today that there's no way that they will bench Big Ben, but obviously we saw the Broncos do that with Peyton Manning back in 2015. But if they're not going to bench Big Ben, what do they do? How do they scheme? Is there anything they can do, or are they just done for?
No, yeah, they bring in Matt Canada. They promote him from the quarterbacks coach. I don't know how much you guys follow college football, but Matt Canada is this kind of like mad scientist wizard fella who gets sacked everywhere he goes, but he runs really bizarre stuff where they'll shift every player, the line, 3 times on a play. I mean, this is like whatever is permissible in the rule book, he'll run it. Whether any of it makes sense or works is almost by the by for him. It's just purely like, let me experiment and see what I can do on a football field. And then he gets this job in Pittsburgh, and he even said in the offseason, oh, yeah, we're not running any of my stuff. We're running what Ben wants to run. It's like, well, why did you hire this guy who's been proven to be bad at every level if you're not going to run the stuff? The idea was all these crazy motions, confuse and clobber, play action, and we kind of hide Ben with all this weirdness, right? And instead they just say, no, we'll just run what Ben runs, and Ben now doesn't want to get hit anymore, so he won't stand in the pocket, and he doesn't have the arms for him to throw the ball down the field. So we're stuck in no man's land. Oh, and by the way, our offensive line stinks. So that's how we're going to roll all season. And how you fix or address any of that, I have no idea. Haskins would be what I would do, is just see what you've got in Haskins. I don't know why they didn't try and get Gardner Minshew when he was available for a conditional 6th round pick. It's like free quarterback, and they didn't get involved in that. That's confusing to me. Honestly, I think this thing ends. If he's going to play, I would not be stunned by like a week 11 retirement announcement where he's like, look, this sucks, man. I don't want to get hit anymore. I just got hit. One of those weeks where he gets really, cleaned by Cleveland or something. And he's like, this is just not fun. We're out of the playoff race. I'm done.
Well, if he's struggling in September, Ollie, what's he going to be like coming around in December? So I think that says it all. Just looking ahead to next week's game in London, the Jags and the Dolphins, and in particular Tua. I know he's injured at the moment, and I suppose it's questionable at this stage whether he's going to be available and traveling next week to play in the game. Where do you stand on Tua? Because there's a lot of mixed views. I mean, I know a number of Dolphins fans. Some love him, think he's the answer long term. Some think I wouldn't say he's a bust, but they're questioning already whether he's going to be there in the long term.
Yeah, and the difficult thing for them, they got to watch this Justin Herbert fella go out there every week and step into the
fifth pick as opposed to the 4th pick.
It's just brutal, man. And he looks amazing, and he comes out and he plays amazing, and it's just that so ahead of schedule to everyone in the history of the game, other than Mahomes, to be genuinely a top 6 quarterback in the league instantly after being an average college player. It's just mind blowing. I went into the season, I was like, this is the thing about Tua. This is a bit in the weeds, so I apologize, but certain guys are really predominantly hip throwers. The way QBs were taught to throw the ball changed about 6-7 years ago because of Aaron Rodgers, and they had to learn to throw with their hip, essentially, which meant they could throw with their legs all over the place. You see Rodgers do that. His legs are going everywhere. There's no mechanics anymore, and he can still put the ball down the field, and they readdress how they move their hips, essentially. And Tua was a giant believer in this. He went to all these, special camps where he's doing flexibility with the hips, all that Dak Prescott pregame stuff, and it's all about the hips. So then when you explode your hip in your final game in college, your choice then is either to wait for that to re-strengthen and see what that looks like in a year, or completely to rechange your throwing mechanics from the ground up, which is what he did the first year. He was a different guy throwing the ball physically than he was in college. So I was waiting this year to see, well, is he going to stick with that? And is that just what it is? There's something up with the hip long term? Or will, after a year of recovery, will he be able to go back to doing the old style throwing where he was just so fast at getting the ball out? Because he didn't need to be planted. You could just see it and rip it because he was basically throwing from the hip. So I still think that's TBD. If he is a changed player forever and he had to relearn his throwing motion, essentially, he just doesn't have the other attributes you would need, to be able to win that way. The way he wins is accuracy and getting the ball out that beat quicker than everyone else. So I guess we'll find out when he's back. I think it's something you will know. I think we'd have known by now if he'd stayed healthy. We'd have been like, yeah, it's just not going to be there. And they need him because they've been terrible without him.
Final question, Ollie, and our shameless plug with our sponsors, Matchbook, because we're gonna do our picks after, okay, right? So just a heads up. Who's your pick tonight and why?
Is this with a spread or is this straight up?
Whatever way you want, man.
Okay. Let's just do the Rams for each. I think when you have basically the Seahawks' entire staff is like, one, let's go and take a guy from the Rams on offense. Then defensively, let's completely change the structure that's worked for this coach for 25, 30 years and try and mimic the Rams in an offseason. I feel like the Rams are going to have a pretty good idea of how to attack both those things. So I just that Seahawks defense is a tire fire right now. I don't really trust Ken Norton to be able to figure that out that fast. I think it'll take them a few weeks. So I'll take the Rams.
It's late. I was on mute. I'm sorry for people listening on the podcast. I apologize. Ollie, look, thanks a million for coming on, man. If you're over at the games this weekend or next weekend, give us a shout, and really appreciate you coming on. And hopefully we can chat to you again soon, man.
Yep, anytime. Thanks, guys.
Thanks, Ollie.
Thank you very much, Ollie. Thank you very much. And hopefully, folks, I'll put Ollie's @ as well. Whoop, don't know what happened to the camera there. I'll put Ollie's Twitter details as well in the description below to try and give him a follow as well. That was good crack. Even better crack, boys, is now this. We're going to have to get into position here. Ready? So we're sort of in.
This is where we need Mark, because normally it's 4 little heads squashed in.
This is.
Make your mind up time, is it?
This is it. Making your mind up. Okay. This is it. Tonight is Thursday Night Football. It's the Seahawks 2-2 against the Rams 3-1. Colin, first for you. What's your thoughts ahead of this game tonight? Obviously, presented by our partners at Matchbook Betting Exchange. Use code IrishNFL for a bonus on your first deposit, 18 plus. Please do not gamble any more than you can afford. Who have you got, Colin?
Well, I said on Monday I went for the Raiders, but I did say that it wouldn't surprise me if Chargers won. Also, Chargers are my favorites for the division, and that I predicted that if you went with it, you would lose money. So that's the caveat with my pick. But everyone's going on the Rams. I just feel this could be a bit like remember that Rams Chiefs game that was an absolute shootout a few years ago. I wonder, did the Rams expend a little bit too much energy on that Bucs game? And I think there could be a little bit of a hangover. And I know there are issues with the Seahawks on defense, but Russell Wilson is able to just make things happen. And I just don't think the Rams are as solid on defense as they have been. They lost a bit of magic when Staley went over to the Chargers. It stayed in the city but went elsewhere. And for that reason, because I think the Seahawks really need it, I am thinking that the Seahawks are going to get the win tonight.
The big Pete Carroll fan, Colin Cronin from
That'll tell you what I think.
Slamming the chair now after this season.
And I'm going with Pete Carroll. But Brian, he'll probably, despite me, he'll probably coach another 10 years.
Yeah, I know. And unfortunately, Bob wasn't there to answer that question. And it was a good question. I would have loved to hear what he had to say on it. Look, I wasn't convinced by Seattle last week. I said it on Monday's show. Their offense struggled in the first half. And the only reason they were in that game at halftime was, unfortunately, because, as Colin alluded to, Jimmy G just didn't do enough. And as it happens, maybe it was because he had that injury. Not sold on Trey Lance just yet. He struggled in the second half. But this Seahawks defense, for me, is the defense that we saw in the first half of last season as opposed to the second half. And Stafford's only been sacked 3 times. He's got plenty of weapons there. And Darrell Henderson, who I feel is a very underrated running back, will have a good game. And I think the Rams will rebound. You're talking about hangovers. Well, I think the hangover came last week at home to the Cards. And I think they'll be fired up with another NFC West divisional game, knowing that whilst the Cards are 4-0, if they win this game, they're 2 games ahead of the Seahawks. And for a long time, the Seahawks have been the benchmark of this division. So for me, Stafford rebounds, McVay gets his win, and they roll on to 4-1.
Talking about hangovers, Sunday morning, 9 a.m., Tottenham Hotspur Stadium, the Falcons against the Jets. Can't wait for that. So Brian's picking the Rams. No Mark here tonight. No comments asking where Mark was.
No one's missing Mark tonight. We do have his pick. We do have his pick.
We do. In a video form.
What are you talking about?
Now, what am I talking about? Here he is.
we've got another great game now tonight on Thursday Night Football, which makes up for a couple of clunkers we've had the last couple of weeks. And it's again this super, super competitive and fantastic division in the NFC West. For me, it's a couple of key questions here. Matthew Stafford never beaten the Seahawks in Seattle. He might have bad memories going back to 2017 playoff loss, where his Lions at the time got obliterated by the Seahawks. But the Rams, generally, when it comes to playoffs against Seahawks, are obviously riding on the coattails of that great victory they had in January. Aaron Donald, of course, continues to be a big difference maker in this. And bear in mind, he has sacked Russell Wilson 13 times, more than any other quarterback. So he's going to continue his biannual chase of him around the field. For me, when I look back at January, I feel that the Rams have improved with Matthew Stafford in the lineup, and they've certainly been enjoying that new toy in the Sean McVay offense. And the Seahawks have disimproved, and obviously they've bounced back from their 2-game losing streak in winning at San Fran last night. But for me, Rams in this one, but proves to be or should be a cracking game. I'm very much looking forward to it.
Podcast viewers, you missed out. That was a proof of life video if ever I saw it. It looked like Mark was being held hostage deep in an underground bunker. Wow.
Right enough.
I think you would have had a shave for the video, wouldn't you?
So,
thank you, Mark, for sending that in. Mark is not with us on Sunday in London. He's with us for week 2. I am looking forward to giving him serious grief.
I hope you're not going to get I hope you're not getting 14, 15 videos for every game on Sunday. We'll be there to kickoff.
No.
Maybe
there might be a surprise
video. GoFundMe to raise enough money to pay obviously
for
the
cardboard
ransom that we're going to have to get Mark back out of wherever he's been held.
It's in his man cave.
Let me round this up very quickly. I picked the Seahawks to lose last week against San Francisco, and they proved me wrong. Albeit they shouldn't have won the game, and the Rams are going to defeat them very easily tonight. And I don't think the 12s will make a difference. I want to apologize to Bob. I feel like we could have had great crack with Bob, but Bob, I'm sorry, man. I'm sorry. I'm just picking the Rams. I think tonight is the night that maybe for the first time in a long time the Seahawks start to go down. And I said it in your gaff, Brian. I don't think the Seahawks will make the playoffs. I think the Rams will move to 4-1, and then there's only one show in town, and we all know what that is, boys. It's the big game on Sunday. It is the massive game between the New York Jets and the Atlanta Falcons. A huge game this Sunday. While I'm basically I'm talking so the music works, but it's not working. So just gonna,
okay. It is a big game. Let's be fair. I know that people go, "Oh, look, neither of the teams are in reality are going to the playoffs." But I mean, the Jets. Last week we felt the Jets weren't going to win a game all season. Within a week they could have 2 wins. The Falcons really should have won last weekend against Washington, and they could have went 3-2. So they need to rebound, and they'll expect to rebound against the Jets. So for me, it's an enticing game. It's an afternoon game. I mean, who wouldn't want to be watching NFL on a Sunday afternoon?
Absolutely. And Colin, you must be very excited for this Sunday. Yeah, very excited.
I'm really looking forward to seeing Zach Wilson and seeing what he can do, because I do think both of these teams are going to go into this game thinking it's absolutely winnable. I mean, especially now with the Falcons losing their number 1 receiver, because the Falcons have to score points, right? Looking at their defense and what they've given up. They have to score points, and the Jets will definitely be coming in feeling a lot better about themselves in the manner of their victory as well. Even they took advantage of the fact that the Titans were without their wide receivers, so you're not going to be able to run all over the Jets. So I think this could be an intriguing matchup, but to get the opportunity to see Zach Wilson early in his career, I think will be a really, really interesting one on Sunday.
Really excited for Sunday. Really excited. A couple of things before we go. Obviously, that show live both Sundays 9 a.m. We're also giving away 2 tickets in Block 114 for the game this Sunday against the New York Jets against the Atlanta Falcons. Game kicks off at 2:30. The competition is our pinned tweet on Twitter, and that goes on until 12 p.m. Friday. And a winner will be announced shortly after. All we ask is that you go to the game. Literally, that is all we ask, is that you go to the game. But that's it. That is it for this week on Thursday night on the Irish NFL show. I hope you enjoy Thursday night football, and we'll be back on Friday morning. No, we won't. Back on Sunday morning. We'll be back on Friday morning.
Sunday morning.
It's been a hell of a week. Sunday morning, and then we're back live on Monday night if Brian gets back into Dublin again.
I'll be grand. I'll be grand. It's great to see Colin declaring his love for Zach Wilson already with his T-shirt tonight. I love you. Right.
See if you there's your pick spoiler ahead of Sunday.
Well, we'll see. Right. See you.
Let's see. Boys, thank you very much. And folks, we will see you on Sunday morning when the New York Jets are going up against the Atlanta Falcons in Tottenham Hotspur Stadium. Looking forward to it. We'll see you then. Have a lovely weekend in the meantime, and see you on Sunday. Slán fáil.